Hey friends, Christy here with Little Roots Ranch and the turkeys. And today I wanted to talk about the importance of deep watering and also explain the difference between watering and deep watering and some kind of what I think the disconnect is or whatever. So I'll start off with my back reasoning is I've got two friends actually that I have helped them kind of throughout the spring. But, you know, as far as been in touch about, sorry, the sun's moving, been in touch about like when to seed things and what they're seeding, transplanting, things like that. And I have been visiting both gardens, and recently I was visiting my one friend's, and she said, oh, I got to go water. Do you want to come with me? I said, absolutely. My favorite place is to be in the garden. And so I went with her. And we were talking about something else, but I was watching her, and she had a hose with the nozzle, obviously, and she was kind of just going through shower setting, you know, and watering her plants. And so, you know, I said, hey, can I ask a few questions about your watering? And she's like, yeah, absolutely. I said, you know, how often do you water? Is this a normal watering style for you? Like, what are we doing here? And she had said that was the regular way that she watered, and she watered every day. And you know, I was looking at her garden, which is very stunted, very small, not as green. Some plants that are starting to develop, but really small, and a lot of dissatisfaction with the garden. And it made me think about another friend that I had just visited with. And I realized that I'm sure there are many factors in general, and I do have a lot of experience with gardening, clearly. And there are a lot of balls that I drop in my own garden. Like I try to be as transparent as possible. Like my last video, I showed that I was too late in getting my garlic. I was also too late in getting my cauliflower. You know, I try and stay on top of weeds. I try and all these things. I am human. But one thing I never, ever, ever drop the ball on is watering. And not just regular watering, but deep watering. So I started thinking about my friends and their gardens and sorry, it's hot. And so I was talking to them or thinking about their gardens, and I realized that, and thinking back to other people I've seen and stuff like that, and I think there's a big disconnect as far as how deep watering occurs, especially up here in the Pacific Northwest, because I think that we have a lot of rain, sprinkles, drizzle, whatever, through a large percentage of the year. But we are unique in that summertime, zero rain. Like I have a lot of East Coast and Midwest farmers that I'm friends with, and they get these huge rainfalls that displace the seeds and the dirt and all that stuff and run off, and they have to control for that. And we don't get that. We get a lot of rain, but it's kind of spread out. And then in the summer, we're basically like the desert. We don't get any rain. I know this year, June was a little, we had more rain than we have had in the past 4 or 5 years. But, you know, it's July. We haven't had any rain. None's predicted. You know, I don't know if we'll get it in August, but I don't think so, you know. And so I realized that I wanted to share with you guys, just because I don't know your gardening specifics. Obviously, it's different if you have a huge farm or if you have just a few patio plants. It makes a difference whether you have raised beds or containers. Containers dry out the absolute fastest. You know, if you're in the city, it's going to be warmer. You know, like I have a lot of tree cover, like right now, a lot of my garden is in the shade or dappled shade. And so that's nice for water conservation stuff. I also know that for a lot of you, water is really expensive and it's metered and it costs. And water conservation is obviously exceptionally important to me. But I am on well. And so I don't pay like per gallon or cubic gallon, or I don't know what the measure is, but I don't pay for my water, but I also don't abuse that. But I also want to grow my produce and vegetables and support myself and things like that. So I wanted to talk about something to consider if you feel like you're struggling with your garden. Now, there could be a lot of differences that feed into this, but in a lot of people that I've been analyzing, I think that it comes down to a watering plan. So the first tip, I guess, that I would say is that I think that you would want your watering that is dependent or not dependent on you standing there without a task. I guess if you're on the phone or something, that might give you a little bit more time. But I think, you know, all of us are pretty busy. And I think that if you are just standing there with a hose and a nozzle, excuse me, thank you, boys. But, you know, it's going to be hard to stay there long enough to actually give your garden a deep watering. And so if you're one of those people that kind of waters a little bit each day, I would really challenge you to take the amount of waterings that you give in the week and have that dedicated to one day, either once or twice, depending of course on your sun exposure, temperatures, things like that. But once or twice doing a deep watering. Now, I'll tell you what I do here. So you can see my bed. They are 4 feet wide by 26 feet. And so I use this sprinkler here. This is not sponsored or anything. It's Melnor XT or whatever. And what I like about, I do own every sprinkler head that has ever been invented. And so far this is my favorite, but it also depends on your setup and what you're looking for. What I like about this one is that it's fully customizable. It can go, this was from Amazon, I don't remember the price. It can go left and or like any direction, but then also right here, you can move these and it's completely adjustable. And then it has the tripod bottom. And so this is just what works best for me. In different situations, like I have one that I prefer better. It's like a spiral one for the greenhouse because it throws more mist. So I haven't used this in the greenhouse. I might take that back. But I think the key is to have something that you don't have to physically watch and then letting it run for a good amount of time. Now the space you're covering depends. So I told you about my size of my raised bed. So this sprinkler, which I have good water pressure off of my well, this sprinkler will cover 6 of my beds. So it's basically like a quadrant of the cottage garden. That's a pretty good size area that it covers. And I let that run for 1 to 2 hours depending, and it covers the entire thing. Now I wouldn't spend, if I had like a 4x4 raised bed, I wouldn't need to water it for 2 hours because it isn't spread out. I also, when I'm watering, I do get it in my pathways, but that's also okay because I have behind me a line of cottons, some alders. I've got a cotton over there that's, I mean, he's just huge. And so I'm also watering like the soil life of the ground as well. It's not going to waste or whatever. But I think that's the number one key. And even if you don't have, if you're not in a place where you can buy, you know, special sprinkler heads or even a sprinkler head and you have a nozzle. When I first started gardening, what I did is I would take like an outdoor chair, just any chair, and a little bit of balancing act, and thank you boys, and my nozzle, and I would balance the chair close, because I obviously had a smaller garden then, and then I would put the hose either on like a mist or a shower or maybe a circle, or depending on like how big of an area or how far or whatever. And then it would take, sometimes I have to use something else like a stick to help it balance, but then I would turn it on and leave. And so that way the water was continuously flowing. And so you're not necessarily, you're taking less time or equal or less time, because instead of watering every single day and standing there and going through, moving your hose around your garden, things like that, you just let it get a deep water. Because I would encourage you to dig into your garden. Now I have, as you can see in all of my beds, I do a pretty intense planting. And so that does help to keep the soil cooler. And so the evaporation is less. But any hot day for any of us, even on the west side of the Cascades, but especially if you're on the east or south or Texas, Arizona, any of that, that hot sun is going to pull up all of the water in the top 2 inches in general. Also, if you're looking at the structure of a plant, the roots, just as it grows up tall, the roots go down, and actually beforehand, you know, they're the anchor, they fuel all of the upward growth, and the interchange of sugars and all that stuff is all done by the root. Roots are so important, and of course providing that water. And so if you're just coming through and kind of changing dirt color, I would say, you know, from like light brown to a dark brown, black, whatever, and you're coming through, like you're putting water onto the soil. Yes, absolutely. But is it having that time to seep down and saturate? That's one that you should check. And I don't mean dig like a teeny little hole, but try and get down there and see till you get a kind of a flow of how your soil is acting and retaining water and stuff like that. And so that's the importance of that deep water. Not only that, a lot of things like garlic, which I understand we've already harvested our garlic, tulips, my leeks, who else is deep planted? Oh, carrots, for instance. Hopefully you have really huge carrots, right? Like that would be awesome. Thank you, boys. And so you think about that root zone, because there's the actual carrot, and then the taproot goes down from there, and then all of the little side roots and stuff like that. Like you need to be able to get the water all the way down there. And even something like the humble radish that's fairly small, he still sends a root. When you pull the radish or the carrot or whatever, it breaks because it's like a hair-like root. Well, maybe not hair, a little bigger than hair, but not much larger. You don't even see that. It stays in the ground. But there's roots beyond just the humble radish or the carrot or whatever, And so I would really encourage you, if you are struggling in your garden or you feel like you're doing a lot and you're not seeing a lot of growth or green or beautifulness, I would definitely encourage you to think a little bit harder, or like reflect a little bit on your watering technique and use of that ever important. I think that's the literally number one important thing with the garden, is doing that deep watering so they always have access. The second part of that really is, if you evaluate like the things that we grow, like I guess not intentionally, none of us are trying to grow grasses for the most part, but think of thank you, boys. Think of the things that we're trying to grow: cucumbers, strawberries, tomatoes, all of those things. The best word to describe those? Juicy. Where's juicy come from, right? So not only is the plant taking in the water to help itself cool down and all of that, but it's busy growing a juicy, delicious strawberry. I saw a statistic that for best production, each strawberry plant needs 1 gallon of water per week. 1 gallon. And I've seen that number at 3 gallons, but I've most often seen that number at 1 gallon. But I've got, one bed over. You can't see it. I've got, you've seen in other videos, my strawberry beds. And so I've got between 100 to 200 strawberry plants that started off, obviously I've got daughters and stuff like that. I'm not saying I'm dumping 200 gallons of water into each bed each week. That's a lot. But I'm also watering significantly once a week, super deep watering, sometimes twice a week, depending. We just had the little heat wave. And really allowing those roots to take care of the plant itself, but also juicy strawberry, juicy tomato, juicy cucumber, zucchini, whatever it may be. They're like 90% water or something like that. And I've noticed that within my strawberries, if I'm not watering well, or I'm slow to pick up watering when they're really coming online, like say in, mid-June, early mid-June or whatever, in a dry month. This June was not dry, but you know what I mean. It just even the size and like they're still good, don't get me wrong, but there's a little bit of a difference. It's like a firmer, a little bit drier, still good, but I'm not growing my best strawberries. So anyways, if any of you have other watering tips to share, or if you've gone through any watering related things with your garden, and if you want to share those so we could all learn from each other, would absolutely love that. Go ahead and drop that below. I hope you enjoyed the video, and happy gardening. I've got to go braid my garlic and get it all ready and all that stuff. So see you later. Bye.